There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Well, hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel, and here I am christening my new portable lawn chair to find a shady spot this morning, and this is actually very close to my apartment. It is quite a bit cooler in the shade than if I was over there in the sunshine, but I don't want to be squinting at you for the duration, so we'll just go with this and I'll warm up eventually. It's supposed to get up to 34 today, I think, so it's supposed to be a hot one, but it's not that hot in the shade at 7 a.m. or whatever time it is. Anyway, I want to start on a bit of a sober note to address a really troubling issue, which is that a noted Indigenous writer, activist, comedian in Saskatoon has been missing along with her 7-year-old son for the past week. I saw the distressing news reports about Dawn Walker's disappearance, and I didn't put it together with, she has published her fiction under her, I think it's her maiden name, Dawn Dumont, until Lindy brought it to my attention, and I've been following the story all the more closely ever since. It has now been a week since she and her son disappeared, and that kind of a story doesn't usually end well after a week, but fingers crossed that this story doesn't end the way so many do. The police are investigating. They do not think it was related to any kind of a domestic situation, despite the fact that she had filed domestic abuse, charges against a previous partner or something. I don't know the details, but the police are not investigating it along those lines. Who knows what happened? But to put this in context, and it's tragically ironic that Dawn Dumont Walker was a tireless advocate on this exact issue, which has been referred within the Canadian context as murdered and missing Indigenous women. And there have been thousands and thousands and thousands of murdered and missing Indigenous women in Canada over the past decades, and larger society and the legal system, the policing, the police have been terrible at not dealing with it, treating crime of this nature flippantly compared to if it was white women that had gone missing. And so it's an issue that has been raised and is much more at the forefront of the Canadian national consciousness than it was. Dawn Dumont Walker was one of the women who worked so much on this issue, and now she herself and her 7-year-old son have gone missing. So it's just, I just feel sick about it. I have never read anything by Dawn Dumont, but she's been on my radar for a while, largely because Lindy is a big fan of her stuff. Her debut novel was in 2011 called Nobody Cries at Bingo, and I know Lindy has read that, and that I think I have the ebook of that based on Lindy's passionate recommendation. Her second book, also a novel, Rose's Run, 2014, and then a collection of short stories, Glass Beads, which I'm pretty sure Lindy has read and enjoyed that one. And then I don't have it on the Wikipedia page, but I believe she's had another novel just come out in the last year. So it shouldn't affect me anymore because she's a writer that I was interested in reading, but in a sort of a way it does. I'm not a prayer, but she's certainly in my thoughts. And but anyway, I don't know what to say beyond that, but I wanted to start today's Friday Reads thinking about Dawn Dumont. So So, changing the subject now, I've got my Frappuccino, and I don't have any other big news. I've had a good week. My stuff that I shipped with the moving company from Tokyo that left Tokyo May 1st arrived at my apartment here in Saskatoon last Friday, and everything came in beautiful condition. My God, even the sturdy cardboard boxes that they were packed into in my apartment in Tokyo didn't have a scratch or a dent on them. Just the Japanese do that sort of thing very well, and I have opened almost everything, including my ceramic collection, Japanese pottery collection, and no damage. So that's good. I've got a whole bunch more books. My bookshelves are fuller, and I'm all the more settled into my new place. Beyond that, I don't think I have a whole lot of chatty news. Things are going well, and not much has been happening, which means that I had quite a bit of time to read this week. I only ended up finishing one more, and I started one. I finished The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim. I just finished it on audio about 20 minutes ago. And I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it very much. I didn't end up loving it. I gave it 4 stars. I probably don't have as many complaints about it as I did about my 4-star read last week, but it wasn't quite a Sean book by the end. I enjoyed the humor without it really quite tickling my funny bone. The writing was lovely. The lush Italian backdrop for the novel was gorgeously rendered on the page by Ms., or should I say, what was she, a princess? Lady von Arnim. She was part of the nobility, I think. This novel was published exactly 100 years ago, 1922, about 4 women who were strangers to each other sharing an Italian villa, I think it was an old castle, for a 1-month rental because none of them could afford it on their own. And so it's very much a novel about female space and about taking space and about the male gaze, and it wears its themes lightly, and I would argue a little too lightly for my taste, but certainly showed a whole bunch of social and gender dynamics in a way that gave me lots to think about, alongside the kind of comedy of manners, frolicsome, whimsical story that was being told. So all of that I enjoyed. Now, I've seen a reference to the fact that this Elizabeth von Arnim's most well-known novel is also her lightest, so I will look up some of her other work, because this was too light for my tastes, and I kind of hated the ending. I almost hated the ending. It followed the comedy of manners kind of tropes. I'm still not quite comfortable using that word tropes because it's misused and overused, but I think I would be right to call them tropes. And the way that all the loose ends were tied up and all the coincidences, and the way that some of that rather exciting, daring, proto-feminist energies of the novel were kind of undone by the ending and by the fact that all these men ended up swarming these 4 women, and how easily they shifted into the heterosexual nonsense of, romantic coupling and blah, blah, blah. It didn't really work for me. I think it probably, actually most of my Goodreads friends gave it 4 stars, so I haven't seen a 5-star review yet, and it definitely was not a 5-star book for me, but I enjoyed it for what it was, to the degree that I'm capable, because I don't like my fiction to be quite so light-hearted, but I will go on to read other Elizabeth von Arnim. I just marked it as read, gave it 4 stars on Goodreads, and within about 1 minute, Steve Donahue commented on the tweet that, Goodreads spits out a tweet to say, Sean Mooney, 4 of 5 stars to the Enchanted April, and Steve said, "My God, only 4 stars? What did she have to do? Cook you breakfast or something like that?" So apparently Steve and I don't agree about this book, but that wouldn't be the first time. But yeah, it was mostly enjoyable, a little bit too light. Glad I read it. And I started Margaret Atwood's short story collection, Stone Mattress. Now, she calls it Tales, so the subtitle, 9 Tales, and she makes something of the fact that these are not short stories, they are tales, and that'll be an interesting part of the discussion that Heather of Soggy Expat Book Nerd and I will have when we hook up on Zoom later, once we've both finished the book. I read the first story, entitled Elfinland, and I really quite enjoyed it. I haven't quite decided if I loved it yet. I'm gonna have to let it sit. I just finished it yesterday, maybe the day before, and I see I've just got a bare start on the second story, Revenant, and some of the same characters are in it, so it's maybe a short story cycle, which I hadn't expected, but I certainly enjoyed the opening story far better than I've enjoyed most Margaret Atwood short stories. I read Wilderness Tips years ago and I didn't like it that much, and I thought, no, she's more of a novelist than short story writer, and my theory that you're either an excellent short story writer or an excellent novelist, and You Cannot Be Both was born from that, comparing, Alice Munro, Mavis Gallant, whose novels weren't very good, and Margaret Atwood, whose short stories weren't very good. But I have since been disabused of that pat analysis, but I think it's mostly true. We'll see if getting all the way to the end of Stone Mattress makes me revise that inchoate, half-baked theory even more. But yes, I did very much enjoy the first story. It opens pretty much around the present day with a big ice storm, and this widow is living alone in her house and scared to go outside because it's so icy. And she does make a foray to the local convenience store, and very gingerly, her dead husband, she's hearing voices. Her dead husband is kind of talking to her, but it's not set up as some kind of a supernatural story. It's just that this is perhaps a coping mechanism with her grief. She is also a fantasy fiction writer of some repute, and the fantasy world, or the series of novels, I think they were novels, is called Elfinland. And so there's a lot about writing and about marriage and fidelity and the creative process. I thought it was particularly good about sexuality. This fantastical literary, fantasy literary enterprise that she began during a previous relationship that was incredibly sexual, set in Yorkville, which in the 60s was known as a hippie district, and now in Toronto, I lived in Toronto in the 90s, it had lost all of that hippie dippiness and was this really upscale, snobby part of downtown Toronto. But Atwood sets this earlier relationship in the hippie heyday of Yorkville, and how she started writing because her poet lover, who couldn't keep his hands off her voluptuous breasts and ass, much is made of that in a way that I just thought was quite powerful and probing, and that may be the wrong word to use in this context, but I won't edit it out, that she needed to put food on the table, she and her hippie poet, and so she started writing these stories that sold, and then it became, her life's work. Very interesting. I really liked it. That's all I have to say for now, but it's certainly starting out good. And so I finished one, so I'm now down to only 10 current reads, people. My current reads has not been this low in years. So I have purposely not replaced a bunch of books I finished up recently so that I could hit the ground running for Women in Translation Month, which begins on Monday, but I'm not sure I'm going to wait until Monday. I might get started a day or two early. We'll see about that. So I'm going to be starting 4 books from my TBR, but I'm also going to start one other book. And it will depend on whether it's a new release. It should be coming out next Tuesday. If it doesn't come out next week, I may pick up something else, but not off my Women in Translation Month TBR, to keep a variety of stuff I'm reading. I am really cold this morning. And I thought, oh, Sean, get out there really early because it's going to be so hot. But it is not hot. And I don't have the energy to try and move into the sun. And I know if I move into the sun, I'll be like this for the whole rest of the video. So, yeah. Can you see my nipples through my new blouse? I haven't even talked about my new blouse. What do you think? It came in the mail this week from China. I'm not as sure about it as the picture, but I think I like it. Yeah, I think I like it. Wish the hell it was long sleeved at this exact moment, but I actually just made a switcheroo because I just remembered one of the books on my TBR is a tome, and so I'm going to start it instead of the Ukrainian sex book because it's shorter. I kind of forgot about that when I was making a plan for the coming week. That one I only have as an ebook. Yes, I am going to start the Brazilian novel, Her Mother's Mother's Mother and Her Daughters, by Maria José Silveira, translated from the Portuguese by Eric M.B. Becker. Talked about it in my TBR. It is a tome. It's about 500 or 600 pages, and it is 20 generations of women down the matrilineal line, starting in about the year 1500. And I love the opening sentence. I think I read it to you, didn't I? Yes, read it to you in the TBR video. You can go check that. And because it's such a big book, I'm going to get started. So that is one of the books I'm going to be starting. And if I start any of them before Monday, it'll be that one, because that's the tome of my TBR. I had originally thought I would start Fieldwork in Ukrainian Sects by Oksana Zabuzhko, but I'll wait till another week or so and get started on it, but it's a little one. My copy of Négar Djavadi's novel Disoriental has not arrived in the mail from Japan yet, so I did get a library copy. It's the first library book Sean the Book Maniac has borrowed in at least 30 years. I don't do library books at all. I just don't, because look how ugly it is with all this stuff on it. But I got it from the library. A branch of the library is about a 10-minute walk from me. I love libraries, but I don't like borrowing books from libraries. I want the physical book. I have the physical book. It's just in transit. So finally, Tina Cover's most celebrated translation is this novel, and I'm finally going to read it. So I'm going to be starting this one, and I don't need to introduce it otherwise because I'm the last booktuber to read it, I think. I am going to start this collection of short fiction by Cora Sandel, The Silken Thread. This is one of those ugly, I think, print-on-demand covers with the glossy covers. Translated this expertly from the Norwegian by Elizabeth Rocan, and I hope I like the stories as well as I like the novels, but if my theory holds, I shan't. I hope I'm wrong. And this one did come in the mail in the past week. The Mauritian novel, The Last Brother by Nathacha Appanah, translated from the French by Geoffrey Strawn. I love the cover. I had a Zoom chat with Curtis of Curtis Books and Books, and he saw my TBR video and he picked up a copy, different cover, so he and I will be reading it. We're not going to do a buddy read type of thing, but we're both going to be reading it for Women in Translation Month. So those are the 4 from my Wit Month TBR. The 4th one, if it arrives in the store on its pub date that I want to start, is the new Anthony Marra novel, Mercury Pictures Presents. My bite-sized chat with Nancy went up on last night's bite-sized book chat, and that reminded me, oh, that's supposed to be coming out next week. If it is, it's one of the few books this year that I'm going to read immediately upon its release because I am such a devotee of Anthony Marra, especially his earlier novel, A Constellation of Vital Phenomena. So yeah, I'm gonna make room for it in my reading life as soon as I can get my hot little hands on it. If it happens to not be in the store and I can't get a copy right away, then I'll pick something else up and that'll be a surprise. But that is my plan. Well, using this portable lawn chair worked out really well. But sitting in the shade this early in the morning, even though it's supposed to get really hot, I thought it was supposed to get up to about 18 by now, but it sure doesn't feel like 18 sitting in the shade with a breeze blowing on me. But enough about that. That's what I got. Thanks for watching.